Rain poured like sheets of cold glass over the London pavement as Harry locked up the refuse collection depot, his work boots heavy with the weight of another long shift. It was nearly 2 a.m. when he spotted her, just a silhouette at first, curled against a graffiti-covered wall beneath a flickering street lamp. Her hair clung to her face, drenched, and her arms were wrapped tight around her chest as if to hold herself together. Most people would have passed her by, but Harry wasn't most people. Something about the defiance in her posture, the way she flinched when headlights passed, stirred something in him. He cleared his throat and approached slowly, his voice low but firm. "You shouldn't be out here alone, not at this hour, not in this part of town." The girl, startled, turned sharply. Her eyes, wide and guarded, met his. "I don't need your pity," she snapped, though her voice trembled slightly. Harry stayed back, giving her space, the reflective stripes on his uniform catching the weak glow of the lamp. "It's not pity," he said gently. "It's a warm sofa, a hot cuppa, and a night without knives or sirens. That's all." Her eyes darted down the street as if fearing someone might return. Then she whispered, "I got mugged. No phone, no bag, nothing left." Harry hesitated. He had a 6-year-old daughter waiting for him at home, and bringing in strangers was never the plan. But something about her, her quiet desperation cloaked in pride, made it impossible to walk away. "I'm 2 streets down. It's not much, but it's safe. Couch is yours for the night." She didn't speak, only nodded, and her knees buckled slightly as she tried to stand. He steadied her with a hand, careful and respectful, and they walked through the sleeping streets in silence. Inside his modest flat, warmth greeted them in the form of scattered children's toys, a pink rucksack by the door, and the faint hum of a kettle left on standby. He handed her a dry sweatshirt and pointed to the bathroom. "Water takes a minute to warm. There's a blanket in the cupboard. Help yourself." She stopped in the hallway, her arms full of borrowed comfort. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. He didn't hesitate. "Because if my daughter were ever in trouble, I'd want someone to do the same." And with that, he retreated to his room, never asking her name or offering his. He didn't need to. That night, under a stranger's roof, the girl who had once known wealth but nothing of kindness finally slept without fear. Neither of them realized it, but that single act of compassion had already begun to change everything. The next morning dawned with the comforting aroma of burnt toast and instant coffee, a strange contrast to the chaos of the night before. The young woman, who now went by the name Clara, woke slowly beneath a thick blanket, the sound of a child's giggle drawing her from sleep. She blinked in the unfamiliar softness of the living room and saw a little girl sitting cross-legged on the floor, building towers from mismatched plastic blocks. "You're the princess that slept on our couch," the girl said brightly. Clara smiled, truly smiled, for the first time in days. Her name was Rosie, Harry's daughter, and she was full of questions and warmth, completely unbothered by the fact that a stranger had appeared in their home overnight. In the kitchen, Harry was burning eggs with a quiet confidence that made Clara laugh despite herself. When he invited her to help, she hesitated. She'd never been domestic, had barely scrambled an egg in her life, but his easy smile made it feel less like a test and more like a team effort. Together they made an imperfect breakfast, laughter bubbling between moments of clumsy mistakes and spilled ingredients. Rosie beamed as she helped butter toast, clearly delighted by the strange new woman in her home. Later, Clara watched Harry cook a second batch of eggs in secret, clearly meant for Rosie, though he never said so aloud. He had eaten the overcooked, rubbery version she made without complaint, simply because he didn't want her to feel small or embarrassed. That small act, one he never even intended her to notice, hit her harder than any grand gesture ever could. It was in these tiny, ordinary moments, paper towels handed by small hands, laughter over burnt toast, unspoken kindness, that something began to shift in Clara. In a modest kitchen with flickering lights, she didn't feel like a lost runaway or a burden. She felt for the first time in years like a person worth making breakfast for. By the third day, Clara was no longer just a guest. She was part of the rhythm of the house. Though still cautious about revealing too much of her past, she began helping around Harry's modest flat, folding laundry, tidying the living room, and accompanying Rosie to the corner shop for milk. It was a far cry from the sterile, high-ceilinged mansions she had known in her old life. Yet here, among mismatched mugs and creaky floorboards, she felt more grounded than she ever had beneath chandeliers and marble. Harry, for his part, never asked questions. He didn't pry when she left early in the morning for her new job at the local laundrette, a connection he'd arranged through a friend. Nor did he push when she came home exhausted and sore, her hands red from detergent and long hours. At the laundrette, Clara faced a different kind of challenge. The customers were demanding, her co-workers blunt, and the work physically draining. There were moments she wanted to quit, especially after folding dozens of sheets for a last-minute hotel order, but something in her refused to give up. The hardship made her feel alive, made her feel like she was finally earning something real. One evening, after an especially grueling shift, she returned to the flat to find a brand new pair of trainers left by the door. Sturdy, practical, and exactly her size. Tucked inside was a note, written in Harry's unmistakably neat script. "If you're walking away from your old life, at least don't walk in pain." That small gesture broke her, not in a tragic way, but in a healing one. No one had looked after her like that in years, not without an ulterior motive. Harry didn't know who she was, didn't care about her surname or the wealth she had walked away from. He simply cared about her comfort, her dignity, and in that quiet acceptance, Clara felt a sense of belonging begin to grow. Not because someone had offered her a way out, but because for the first time someone believed she could build something of her own. One evening, under the yellow flicker of tired street lamps, Clara found herself helping Harry finish a mountain of laundry orders for a nearby hotel. It was nearly midnight, and they worked side by side under humming fluorescent lights, folding sheets and uniforms in silence that felt more like comfort than awkwardness. Her fingers ached, her back protested, and every part of her body reminded her that she wasn't used to this kind of labor. But something about the honest grind, the shared purpose, made it feel worthwhile. As they loaded the last of the clean laundry into the back of Harry's old pickup truck, Clara groaned with exhaustion, joking that she couldn't feel her fingers. Harry only chuckled, handed her a hot flask of tea, and said, "You'll miss them when they're gone, but even quiet nights have a way of turning." While dropping off a delivery at one of the houses, Clara was startled by a barking dog and fell hard onto the pavement, twisting her ankle and scraping her hands. Harry rushed to her side, shielding her from the dog with nothing but his body and voice. He carried her back to the truck, furious, not because she was hurt, but because she could have been seriously injured. Clara had never seen anyone angry out of fear for her before, not in her father's world, where emotions were carefully edited behind cold politeness and expensive suits. When she whispered through the pain, "No one's ever yelled at me because they were scared for me." Harry's response was soft but clear. "Well, you're in the wrong house now." That night, Clara realized something deep and irreversible had shifted. She wasn't just passing through. She wasn't a runaway anymore. She belonged to something again. A house that was far too small to be called grand, with squeaky floorboards and a child's laughter bouncing off the walls. But it held a kind of love she had never been offered before. The scrape on her hand stung, but it was the feeling in her chest, the weight of being protected, of mattering, that made her heart ache in the best possible way. For the first time, she started to believe that this unexpected detour might not just be a pause in her life, but the start of a much better one. The moment Clara's past caught up with her came as swiftly and brutally as she'd always feared. It started with a flash of a camera and a stranger's voice in the laundrette. "There she is." Panic flooded her chest as a man in a leather jacket raised his phone to snap a photo. "You've been missing for 5 days, sweetheart," he sneered, "and your daddy's offering 6 figures to know where you're hiding." In an instant, the fragile peace Clara had built was shattered. But Harry reacted faster than anyone else would have. Without hesitation, he pulled her out the back door and didn't stop running until they reached his truck. There was no hesitation, no demand for answers, just instinct. He didn't ask why she'd lied or who she really was. He simply got her to safety. Clara's secret, that she was the daughter of powerful billionaire Arthur Devon, was never meant to surface here, in the quiet sanctuary she'd found with Harry and his daughter Rosie. She wasn't trying to manipulate or hide with malice. She was trying to escape a life of control, expectations, and constant surveillance. But now the truth was out, and so was her father. By the time they returned to Harry's house, the sleek black town car was already parked outside, two suited men flanking the steps. Arthur Devon stood at the porch, stern and sharp, surveying the modest surroundings with a mix of disgust and disbelief. "You've had your fun," he said coldly. "Now come home." But Clara stood still. For the first time in her life, she hesitated in front of her father, not out of fear but because she had something to lose now. This house, these people, this life, she wanted to stay. But as always, her father's presence came with weight, spoken or not, pressure she'd grown up under. And even though Harry stood firm, refusing to back down, she knew this choice wasn't just about rebellion. It was about survival. With tears brimming in her eyes, Clara whispered, "I think I have to go." It wasn't the life she wanted, but the one she'd been pulled back into by blood and legacy. She turned from the house that had become a home, leaving behind more than just borrowed clothes and burnt toast. She left behind a piece of her heart. And Harry, watching her disappear into the night, knew that love wasn't always enough to fight the world she'd come from. In the days that followed Clara's departure, Harry's home felt hollow. The laughter that used to echo through the tiny living room was gone. The second cup of tea he always made out of habit remained untouched. Rosie, sensing the absence in a way only children can, grew quieter. She no longer sang to herself when she played, and she started leaving the lights on at bedtime. Harry told her only that Clara had to leave. Sometimes people do, and that it didn't mean she didn't care, but he didn't say much else because even he couldn't make sense of how quickly something so full of life had vanished. He returned to his night shifts, walking through cold city streets, sweeping up the messes of strangers, his thoughts never straying far from the memory of Clara's tired smile or the sound of her laugh over burnt toast. Then, like a whisper breaking through fog, she returned. It happened on the worst possible night. Rosie had fallen ill. What began as a cough had turned into fever, chills, and frightening weakness. By midnight, Harry was driving her to A&E, his hands shaking on the steering wheel as he whispered reassurances to his barely conscious daughter. But when the receptionist asked for a £6,000 deposit, Harry's heart sank. He had just over £100 in his account. He pleaded, offering to pay in parts, anything, but policy was policy. Then came a voice from behind him. "I've got it." He turned, and there she was, Clara. Her hair was damp from the rain, her expression calm but fierce as she stepped forward and placed her card on the desk. "Put everything under my name," she told the nurse. "Room fees, meds, whatever she needs." Harry could barely speak. Even as the doctor ushered Rosie away and the worry in his chest slowly softened into relief, all he could do was sit beside Clara and whisper, "You didn't have to do that." And she, in her quiet way, replied, "I know, but I came back." She didn't return because she felt guilty. She returned because love had changed her. Because despite the money and legacy waiting behind her, this little home, full of flaws and warmth and dinosaur-shaped pancakes, was where her heart had settled. And now, she was ready to fight for it. Clara stood in the marble lobby of her father's penthouse, a world away from the scuffed floors and chipped mugs of Harry's kitchen. Yet she felt strangely smaller here. Arthur Devon, commanding as ever in his tailored suit, sat reading the financial section as if nothing had happened, as if her disappearance had been a minor inconvenience in his pristine calendar. "I figured you'd be back once the dust settled," he said coolly, not even glancing up. But Clara didn't flinch. She hadn't come back to stay. She had come to speak one final time with the man who had controlled her life but never truly known her. He called Harry a janitor, laughed at the idea of her choosing a man who worked 3 jobs to keep the lights on. But Clara didn't waver. "That man," she said, "saved me." And she meant every word. Not from the streets or poverty or any danger, but from a life where love was conditional and appearances ruled everything. Harry had shown her something far more valuable than money: how to live with integrity, how to care without expectation, how to create a home out of love instead of status. Arthur's disbelief was palpable. "You're giving up everything for him?" he demanded. "Security, legacy, your name?" Clara's reply was simple and steady. "I'm choosing my life, my voice, and yes, the man who lives by his hands and his heart." She didn't need penthouses or inheritance. She needed the quiet strength of a man who protected her without controlling her, who taught her that freedom doesn't mean loneliness. It means being seen for who you are and loved anyway. As she turned to leave, Arthur finally looked up and said almost begrudgingly, "Tell him he's lucky." But Clara shook her head gently, with the soft smile of someone who had finally made peace with herself. "No," she said, "I'm the lucky one." And then she walked away, not in defiance, but in grace, back into the life she had chosen, back toward the people who had taught her what it truly meant to be home. The knock on Harry's door came just after sunrise as he stood in the kitchen flipping dinosaur-shaped pancakes, Rosie's favorite. He expected it to be Mrs. Patel from next door, or perhaps the postman, but when he opened the door, time seemed to still. There stood Clara, her jacket damp from the morning mist, hair pulled into a loose bun, and a small paper bag clutched in her hands. "For Rosie," she said softly. "Blueberry muffins, the real kind, no preservatives." Her voice was steady, but her eyes searched his face for something, permission, perhaps, or hope. Before he could speak, she added, "I'm not here to stay the night. I'm here to stay if you'll have me." Harry didn't answer right away, couldn't find the words, but Clara continued, stepping closer, her tone vulnerable but clear. "I've had everything, Jack. Money, holidays, rooms with ceilings too high to see. But I never had someone burn toast for me. I never had a home that felt like it loved me back." She looked around the small house at the chipped paint and creaky floors with something close to reverence. "This place, this life, it's small, but it's full of heart." Harry's throat tightened. "We don't have much," he said, his voice rough. Clara smiled gently. "I had everything," she replied. "I just didn't have a family." Before either of them could say more, Rosie appeared in the doorway, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "Emma?" she asked softly. Clara knelt down, holding out the bag of muffins. "Hey, sunshine, I brought you breakfast." Rosie ran to her, arms flung tight around Clara's neck. "Are you staying forever?" she whispered. Clara glanced up at Harry, who nodded once. She smiled through the tears gathering in her eyes. "Yeah, kiddo, forever sounds good." And in that quiet, modest kitchen, surrounded by love that had nothing to prove, Clara finally knew she was exactly where she belonged. 2 months later, the Saturday sun broke over a bustling London park, casting long shadows across food stalls, barking dogs, and children's laughter. Among them sat a humble converted truck, once Harry's rusted old pickup, now proudly bearing a wooden sign, Jack's Jams, breakfast burritos, muffins, and coffee. The idea had been Clara's, a way to build something of their own, honest and grounded. Now, it was their weekend life. Clara flipped pancakes on a small griddle, hair tied back and face glowing with flour and sun, while Harry took orders with that quiet, patient smile that made even the grumpiest customer soften. Rosie, wearing a paper crown she'd made herself, handed out napkins and smiley face stickers like they were treasure. They didn't make much, not the kind of much Clara had grown up with at least, but they made enough. And more than that, they made a life filled with early mornings, burnt muffins, cheeky giggles, and moments of such ordinary joy that they felt like miracles. Clara, once suffocated by legacy and wealth, now felt rich in a way no bank account had ever given her. Watching Harry from across the truck, she caught him mouthing a silent, "Thank you," and her heart tugged in that quiet, familiar way. She smiled back, thinking about how far they'd come, from the rain-drenched night when he'd offered her a couch, to the hospital room where she returned without being asked, to this moment, where everything felt hard-earned and entirely theirs. No titles, no expectations, just love, work, and warmth. And Clara didn't need chandeliers or penthouse views anymore. She had burnt toast, a child's hug, a man who chose kindness over pride, and that to her was a kingdom. Because sometimes the richest lives are not built with coins and contracts, but with open arms, quiet dignity, and the courage to choose love over legacy. And in the end, Clara hadn't just found a new life. She had built a home, one pancake, one smile, one unspoken "I see you" at a time. In a world where wealth often shouts the loudest, this story reminds us that the quietest hearts can hold the deepest love. Harry had no riches to offer, just a warm couch, burnt toast, and a battered pair of trainers. But those simple gestures spoke louder than any diamond ring or luxury flat. And Clara, born into opulence, didn't find freedom in the vaults of her inheritance, but in the quiet strength of a man who saw her not as a name, but as a person. Real love, real family, and real worth are rarely wrapped in gold. They're built in shared mornings, selfless acts, and the decision to stay when it's easier to run. This tale isn't about a millionaire's daughter falling in love with a poor man. It's about a woman choosing a life of truth over performance, dignity over expectation, and building a home that money could never buy. It's a reminder that what we all long for, especially those of us who've ever felt unseen, unheard, or unloved, is not perfection, but to be chosen and cherished, just as we are. If this story touched your heart, leave us a comment below. Have you ever found love or hope in the most unexpected place? And don't forget to subscribe to Soul-Stirring Stories for more heartfelt tales that honor second chances, quiet heroes, and the kind of love that truly changes lives.